October 15th, 1978. The elegant facade of Théâtre des Arts in the heart of Paris's 9th arrondissement stood as it had for over a century, its ornate stonework and classical architectural details reflecting the golden age of French theater, when this venue had hosted the greatest performers and most celebrated productions in European dramatic history. But behind the timeless beauty of the building's exterior, a devastating crisis was unfolding that would soon destroy not just a historic landmark, but an irreplaceable piece of France's cultural soul. The theater had been built in 1871 as part of the cultural renewal that followed the Franco-Prussian War, representing France's determination to rebuild not just its political and economic strength, but its artistic and intellectual leadership in European civilization. For over a century, the Théâtre des Arts had served as a showcase for French dramatic excellence, hosting premieres of works by the nation's greatest playwrights and providing a stage where the most talented actors could demonstrate the sophistication and emotional depth that characterized French theatrical tradition. The building itself was an architectural masterpiece designed by Charles Garnier's associate, Henri Labrouste, in the same style that had made the Paris Opera a symbol of French artistic achievement. The interior featured a 900-seat auditorium with perfect acoustics, elaborate gilt decorations, and crystal chandeliers that had witnessed generations of theatrical magic and cultural celebration. But by 1978, the theater was facing the same economic pressures that were threatening cultural institutions throughout Paris. Rising real estate values in central Paris, combined with the enormous costs of maintaining a historic building, had created financial challenges that the theater's management could no longer overcome through ticket sales and traditional fundraising efforts. The situation had become critical when the building's owners, the Dubois family, who had inherited the property from their grandfather's estate, announced their intention to sell the theater to Société Immobilière Moderne, a development company that specialized in converting historic properties into luxury office buildings and commercial spaces. The proposed demolition would eliminate the theater entirely, replacing it with a 12-story office complex that would provide modern commercial space while generating substantial profits for the developers. The project had received approval from city planning authorities, who argued that Paris needed more office space to remain competitive with other European business centers. For the French cultural community, the pending destruction of Théâtre des Arts represented more than just the loss of a single venue. It symbolized a broader threat to the cultural heritage that distinguished Paris as the artistic capital of the world and made France a leader in preserving the traditions that connected contemporary society to its greatest historical achievements. The theater's final season was scheduled to end on December 31, 1978, after which the building would be closed permanently and demolition would begin in early 1979. Despite desperate fundraising efforts by cultural organizations and appeals from prominent French artists, the €8.5 million purchase price required to save the theater remained far beyond the resources of the arts community. It was during this seemingly hopeless situation that Alain, at the height of his international fame and financial success, learned about the theater's plight through his longtime friend and colleague, director Claude Lelouch, who had been working with cultural preservation organizations to find a solution to save the historic venue. Alain's connection to the theater was both professional and deeply personal. Early in his career, he had performed in several productions at the Théâtre des Arts, and the experience of working in such a historically significant venue had profoundly influenced his understanding of what it meant to be part of France's cultural tradition and artistic heritage. But beyond his personal connection to the building, Alain understood that the loss of the Théâtre des Arts would represent a broader failure of French society to protect the cultural institutions that made the nation a leader in artistic achievement and intellectual sophistication. The decision he made would demonstrate a level of cultural leadership and personal sacrifice that went far beyond the typical celebrity charity contribution, representing instead a profound commitment to preserving French heritage, even when such preservation required enormous personal financial sacrifice and the complete absence of public recognition. Working through his financial advisors and legal representatives in Switzerland, Alain developed a plan to purchase the theater anonymously, ensuring that the building would be preserved while avoiding any appearance that he was seeking publicity or recognition for his cultural contribution. The strategy required creating a complex network of trusts and holding companies that would conceal his identity while providing the financial resources necessary to not only purchase the building, but establish an endowment that would ensure the theater's long-term financial stability and continued operation as a cultural venue for French theatrical excellence. On November 20, 1978, just 6 weeks before the theater's scheduled closure, the Dubois family received an unexpected offer from a mysterious buyer identified only as Fondation Culturelle Anonyme, a recently established Swiss organization that offered to purchase the theater for 8.5 million euros while committing to preserve the building's historic character and continue its operation as a cultural venue. The offer included not just the purchase price, but an additional 3.2 million euro endowment that would support the theater's operations, building maintenance, and artistic programming for the foreseeable future, ensuring that financial pressures would never again threaten the venue's survival. The announcement that the theater had been saved created celebration throughout the French cultural community, but it also sparked intense curiosity about the identity of the anonymous benefactor who had provided such extraordinary generosity while refusing any public recognition for their cultural contribution. Speculation in French media focused on wealthy industrialists, international philanthropists, and even foreign governments that might have strategic interests in preserving French cultural heritage. But despite extensive investigation by journalists and cultural organizations, the true identity of the theater's savior remained completely hidden behind the sophisticated legal structures that Alain's advisors had created. For Alain personally, the decision to purchase the theater anonymously represented both a significant financial sacrifice and a profound expression of his values about cultural responsibility and artistic heritage. The $11.7 million total investment represented nearly 30% of his personal wealth at the time, requiring him to modify his own lifestyle and future financial planning in order to accommodate such a substantial commitment to cultural preservation. But more importantly, his choice to remain anonymous demonstrated his understanding that true cultural leadership sometimes requires sacrificing personal recognition in order to ensure that the focus remains on the cultural institution being preserved rather than on the individual providing the preservation. The theater's salvation had immediate and lasting impacts that extended far beyond the preservation of a single building. The successful intervention demonstrated that French cultural heritage could be protected through private initiative and personal commitment, inspiring similar preservation efforts throughout France and establishing new models for how cultural institutions could be supported through anonymous philanthropy. Under the management of the Fondation Culturelle Anonyme, the Théâtre des Arts underwent a careful restoration that preserved its historic character while upgrading technical systems and audience amenities to meet contemporary standards. The renovation took 2 years and cost an additional 2.8 million euros, all provided through the anonymous foundation. The restored theater reopened in 1981 with a gala performance featuring some of France's greatest actors, including several of Alain's colleagues who had no idea that their friend and peer had been responsible for saving the venue where they were now performing. The programming at the revived Théâtre des Arts focused on both classic French theatrical works and contemporary productions that continued the venue's tradition of artistic excellence while introducing new generations of audiences to the cultural heritage that the theater represented. The economic model established by the Anonymous Foundation proved so successful that it inspired similar preservation efforts throughout France, with other historic cultural venues receiving anonymous support that ensured their survival and continued contribution to French artistic life. For 15 years, the true identity of the theater's savior remained one of the greatest mysteries in French cultural circles, with various theories and rumors circulating through artistic and intellectual communities without ever approaching the truth about Alain's involvement. The revelation of Alain's role came only in 1993, when a legal dispute over the foundation's tax status required disclosure of its true beneficiary. The discovery that one of France's most famous actors had secretly sacrificed a significant portion of his personal wealth to preserve a historic theater created one of the most celebrated stories in French cultural history. The public response to learning about Alain's anonymous cultural heroism was immediate and overwhelming, with French artistic organizations, cultural institutions, and government officials expressing profound gratitude for his commitment to preserving the nation's theatrical heritage. But perhaps most meaningful was the response from younger actors and theater professionals who realized that their ability to work in such a historically significant venue had been made possible by Alain's sacrifice and vision, creating a legacy of cultural preservation that would benefit generations of French artists. The Théâtre des Arts continues to operate today as one of Paris's most respected theatrical venues, hosting over 300 performances annually and serving as a training ground for emerging French talent while maintaining its commitment to the artistic excellence that has characterized its century and a half of cultural contribution. The theater now features a small plaque acknowledging Alain's role in its preservation, but the inscription emphasizes not his celebrity status, but his commitment to French cultural heritage and his understanding that true artistic leadership requires protecting the institutions that make cultural excellence possible for future generations. The story of Alain's secret preservation of the Théâtre des Arts became a model for other cultural preservation efforts, demonstrating that individual commitment and vision could protect irreplaceable cultural resources while inspiring others to take responsibility for maintaining the artistic heritage that makes civilization meaningful and beautiful. Most importantly, Alain's anonymous cultural heroism demonstrated that true love for French cultural heritage transcends personal recognition and celebrity status, focusing instead on the preservation of institutions and traditions that will continue to inspire and educate long after any individual's fame has faded into history. If this incredible story of cultural preservation and anonymous heroism has inspired you to think differently about protecting artistic heritage, make sure to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to understand that true cultural leadership sometimes requires personal sacrifice without expectation of recognition or reward. Tell us in the comments about cultural institutions in your community that deserve protection and support, because sometimes the most important contributions to civilization come from those who understand that preserving beauty and excellence for future generations is more important than personal fame or financial gain.
The broader cultural impact of Alain's secret preservation of the Théâtre des Arts extended far beyond the salvation of a single historic building, creating ripple effects throughout French society that fundamentally changed how the nation approached the protection of its artistic heritage and the responsibility of successful individuals to contribute to cultural preservation. The success of the anonymous intervention inspired the creation of the French Cultural Heritage Act of 1982, which established new legal frameworks for preserving historic cultural venues while providing tax incentives for private individuals and organizations that contributed to cultural preservation efforts. The legislation specifically referenced the Théâtre des Arts model as an example of how anonymous philanthropy could protect cultural institutions without compromising their artistic integrity or creating dependencies on individual donors who might attempt to influence programming or artistic decisions. For the French theater community, the Théâtre des Arts' salvation demonstrated that private initiative could succeed where government funding and traditional fundraising had failed, encouraging other cultural institutions to develop similar preservation strategies that combined anonymous support with professional management and artistic excellence. The renovation work that transformed the Théâtre des Arts into a modern venue while preserving its historic character became a model for cultural preservation projects throughout Europe, with architects and preservation specialists studying the techniques used to upgrade technical systems while maintaining the building's architectural integrity and historical authenticity. The theater's stage was expanded and modernized to accommodate larger productions while preserving the original proscenium arch and decorative elements that had characterized the venue since its construction in 1871.
Perhaps most significantly, the restoration included the creation of educational spaces and archives that would preserve the theater's history while providing resources for scholars and students interested in French theatrical tradition and cultural heritage. The educational programming that emerged from the restored theater became a model for how cultural venues could serve not just as entertainment facilities, but as centers for learning and cultural transmission that connected contemporary audiences with their artistic heritage. The Théâtre des Arts began offering masterclasses with renowned French actors, workshops for emerging theater professionals, and educational programs for students that provided hands-on experience with classical French theatrical techniques and traditions. The venue also established an artist-in-residence program that supported emerging French playwrights and directors while providing them with access to a historically significant venue where they could develop their craft within the context of France's greatest theatrical traditions. For international cultural organizations, the Théâtre des Arts became a destination for cultural exchange programs that brought foreign artists to France while providing French performers with opportunities to share their techniques and traditions with international audiences. The economic model established by Alain's anonymous foundation proved so successful that it generated surplus revenue that was used to support other French cultural preservation projects, creating a network of protected venues that ensured the survival of France's theatrical heritage across multiple institutions and geographic regions. The foundation's investment strategy, managed by Swiss financial professionals, grew the original endowment significantly over the decades, providing increasingly substantial support for cultural preservation while maintaining complete anonymity about the source of the original funding. By the 1990s, the Fondation Culturelle Anonyme had become one of France's most important cultural preservation organizations, supporting not just the Théâtre des Arts, but also historic concert halls, art galleries, and cultural centers throughout the nation. The mystery surrounding the Foundation's anonymous benefactor had become part of French cultural folklore, with various theories and legends developing about the identity of the individual who had demonstrated such extraordinary commitment to cultural preservation.
Some cultural historians suggested that the anonymous donor was a wealthy industrialist who had made his fortune in post-war reconstruction and wanted to give back to the nation that had enabled his success. Others theorized that the benefactor was an expatriate French citizen living abroad who maintained deep emotional connections to French cultural heritage and wanted to ensure its preservation from a distance. The most romantic theories suggested that the donor was a former performer who had achieved success in theater or film and wanted to protect the venues and traditions that had made his career possible. When the truth about Alain's involvement was finally revealed in 1993, the response from French cultural institutions was immediate and overwhelming, with major cultural organizations throughout the nation expressing gratitude for his vision and sacrifice, while acknowledging that his example had inspired similar preservation efforts across the country. The French Ministry of Culture awarded Alain the nation's highest cultural honor, the Grand Cross of the Order of Arts and Letters, specifically recognizing his anonymous contribution to preserving French theatrical heritage and his demonstration that cultural leadership required personal sacrifice rather than public recognition. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the theater professionals and cultural organizations that realized their work had been made possible by Alain's sacrifice, creating a legacy of gratitude and inspiration that continued to influence French cultural preservation efforts decades after his initial intervention. The Théâtre des Arts today serves as both a working cultural venue and a symbol of what individual commitment and vision can accomplish when combined with genuine love for artistic heritage and cultural preservation. The theater continues to host over 300 performances annually, ranging from classical French drama to contemporary experimental works that explore the boundaries of theatrical expression while honoring the traditions that have made French theater a global cultural treasure. Most importantly, the story of Alain's secret cultural heroism continues to inspire new generations of French artists and cultural leaders who understand that protecting artistic heritage requires ongoing commitment and sacrifice from those who benefit from the cultural richness that previous generations have fought to preserve and maintain.